Hello and welcome to our usual live Friday webcast. My name is Creighton Jones, and joining me in the studio today are Jason Ross and, of course, Mr. Lyndon LaRouche. And today is August the 23rd, 2013. So we're going to get started right away with the questions. Our first question is an institutional question, which deals with the subject of Glass-Steagall. So our questioner asks, Mr. LaRouche, I would like to have your assessment of where the Glass-Steagall battle stands at this time. Congress returns to Washington in 2 weeks, and it is clear that Wall Street and the Obama economic team are in a state of panic over the growing support among the American people and within Congress for the breakup of the too-big-to-fail banks. The fight has already reached the point that Wall Street is deploying in its own name through big bank lobbyists, the American Bankers Association, and other fronts in an effort to put out the fires that are burning all over the country and increasingly around the world. You are one of a growing chorus of economists who are convinced that the entire financial system is on the verge of a major explosion. It also appears that the Obama economics team is also scrambling to install Larry Summers as the next chairman of the Fed. This is diverting attention and creating yet another brawl, with an enormous backlash building against the idea of the man who was pivotal in the takedown of Glass-Steagall being installed at the Fed. What do you see in the coming days and weeks as the shape of the battle?
Well, first of all, you have to realize that what people are forecasting is probably not true, not because they are trying to deceive you, but because they don't know what's coming either. Because the situation is such that intrinsically the banking system of the United States and the transatlantic as well is now headed for an early crash. We can, if you talk about timing by the end of this year, sometime in December or beginning of January, this whole thing is going to crash. And even those who are the big speculators, Wall Street types, and in London as well. But I think the London crowd is sometimes much more intelligent on this question than the Wall Street types. But the point is, what is going to happen is the debt of the United States and the debt also of the nations of Europe, we're in a very similar situation, they cannot survive. The whole system is going to crash. It is not going to be who's going to win. It's who's going to lose what. So that there is no option. And these guys are very forecasters. The only thing, they've been spending so much time stealing that they hadn't taken time to learn how to forecast, is essentially the matter. So we're faced with a situation where none of these guys, a few of the people only, really know what's coming on. It comes under the gauge of the situation now. The system is going to crash. It's going to crash soon. It's going to crash fast. I'm looking at September. For us, September is a very late date to be fooling around with this thing. So this is the kind of situation we're in. Virtually no one. Two things you can say about it. Either they don't know what they're talking about or what they're not talking about, or they're lying. And I think the numbers who think that the liars are probably a smaller fraction, but they're the ones who intend to survive. So what they will do essentially is are going to, with a bail-in as they call it, they're going to eliminate the assets that they can't cover for anymore. And this will mean that people will be starving to death. Throughout the United States, whole sections will be starving to death. So there is no satisfactory solution to this in any way with the Wall Street crowd and London. There's nothing we can do with them. There's nothing we want to do with them. They're going to crash. The problem is people are saying, well, I'm going to survive. But they're kidding themselves. They're not going to survive. the number of people and their amount that will be saved out of this bailout process or the bail-in process will be very few people. And most of the people who are supporting this swindle will be partly swindled too. There are going to be very few survivors when this system comes down. So the problem of forecasting is simple. I can forecast this thing in its present course of direction is going to crash. I expect it to crash during the course of the autumn months going into winter. And by the beginning of the year, you're going to see a crash beyond belief, unless we do something to change this. And that's where it stands. Most people are simply kidding themselves because of they wish to believe. Others are just plain liars. But only a few people will actually come out of this thing alive. That's the intention. Remember, what's the motive behind this thing? Don't just try to beg. What is the motive behind this thing? The British Queen has made it very clear that her intention is for a prompt cutback in the population of the planet. Her intention is to take, of the 7 billion people who were recently living as living persons on this planet, going to be reduced to less than 1 billion people, rapidly. So now count your chances accordingly under that scheme. So what the Queen's demand is, we're going to reduce, according to her, we're going to reduce the population of the planet from 7 billion people to 1. And it's now in the direction of going less than 1 if we extrapolate this process. So the point is, if you're a patriot, your only option is to destroy this oligarchical system. So therefore you have to shut it down. Now, the question is then, what's the shutdown? Well, there's only one option we have. It's called Glass-Steagall. And under Glass-Steagall, under the policy which I've specified, which is Glass-Steagall, but you have to have certain specifications as to how this is going to work. And the way I have it, we will simply put the whole thing through reorganization. It means that we will wipe out the people behind the bail-in and bail-out and so forth. You just have to. They don't have any values. They've been going along with gambling, and never doing anything to secure that gambling. This money that they're supposed assets have, they keep rolling them over, and there's no value in them. So therefore, in the logic of things, the Glass-Steagall will help us by we simply will foreclose on this process. If they have some value in some of these firms that's left after counting what they really still owe, we'll just cancel their obligations. They're out of date. And that will leave them pretty much stripped. Wall Street will not be around after that. But the answer is Glass-Steagall. Because with Glass-Steagall we do two things. First of all, we cancel all these debts that are fake. And now most of the inflation which you're experiencing in the United States and Europe is a result of an inflated value of worthless money. Now there may be some small amount of all that debt that has some intrinsic value, or could be claimed to have intrinsic value. Most of it is going to have to be wiped out. Either it will be wiped out voluntarily or by law, or it will be wiped itself out because it cannot continue to survive, because the money is all fake. So that being taken into account, that is what we're faced with. Now, most people, unfortunately, including bankers generally, and a lot of accountants and general forecasters, really don't understand what this is all about. It's not that somebody's hiding it from them, it's they don't want to believe the truth. So what we would do simply is this. We would take and enact Glass-Steagall. What that would mean is we'd go to a new system. It's the same system that the nation was founded on. The first George Washington administration. Same policy as I'm talking about now. Which means that you give credit. You don't put out money and tell people to buy the money and then spend the money. What you do is you say, you give them credit. Now, the way it would work, for example, the way Alexander Hamilton approached it, what you would do, first of all, you would have a season, just to take a simplistic view of how this thing actually worked with him. You have a season. Now, the season will generally start with a year, which means that you're getting into the beginning of the year, which is the time you start to get into crops. So you have this period from Christmas on, New Year's on, until the crops begin to be planted and harvested, and the similar kinds of things done. And the farmer, in the meantime, is getting ready for the growth of the crops and whatever else is involved in this. Then, at that point, harvest time comes. And at harvest time, now the farmer's product is now on the market, and people are buying that product. So then we go into another phase where now we have the farmer has now become enriched, in a sense. So now we go to a next phase. How about the production, physical production, and so forth, and and also building of canals and things of that sort, which were essential for the economy. So that what we have is we denote the value of transactions in those terms as credit terms, and the credit of the farmer is then used to buy the goods of the machinist or the other trader, and it goes around in that circle. So that really you never are looking at money as such. You may use money as a way of denoting something, paper money, as a way of denoting an obligation, who's got it, what's the score, so forth. But the actual foundation of this is, what are we producing and consuming? And what is the benefit of what we're consuming for us? So on that basis, what I would do, and probably will do if I ever get a chance to do this right now, it's what we have to do right now. We have to put the whole thing through bankruptcy reorganization. And we do that simply by Glass-Steagall. The Glass-Steagall law carried out in the same design that Franklin Roosevelt did it the first time around. And that's the first thing we do. Now we have to go to increase the productivity of the labor force, which means we have to give not only more work, productive work, producing things that are needed, transportation, all kinds of things, but we must also increase the actual physical value in terms of production. More and better crops, more and better manufactures, more and better services, more and more canals, railways, things of that sort. So this whole process is a recycling of the process of productivity. And that's what we have to do. But what we have to do is get Glass-Steagall. The only thing that's worth doing right now in terms of policy is install Glass-Steagall according to the same principles that Franklin Roosevelt employed getting us out of the Depression. And that's the way to look at it. But because the idea that someone on the money side, money bags, can survive as a class, all those guys who are complaining that I might cause them to be robbed of what they want to steal are making a big mistake, because the best chance they've got, they come on our side. They're going to lose all that money that's worthless, but they will have a chance as human beings to get inside a system which will give them a security for times to come. We've got to realize that all this debate that you get on now is based on a false assumption that this is a combat of that we're going to take this money away from these guys. Well, it happens that the assets they're claiming to have as value have very little intrinsic value. What we're doing is we're paying inflation. We're paying for inflation without product. Our food supply has collapsed. It's been collapsed willfully under the two last administrations. The Bush administration was a killer. So was the Obama administration, has been a killer. So it's the destruction of the productive powers and resources of the United States under these presidents, which is the big problem. The problem begins, again, with the cancellation of Glass-Steagall. It was the cancellation of Glass-Steagall that created the problem. If they'd stuck to Glass-Steagall, we wouldn't have this mess. So the problem is entirely a product of inflation turning into hyperinflation under the Bush presidency and under Obama. Bush and Obama have destroyed the U.S. economy, essentially. The economy was still functioning as long as the Bush wasn't in power, was not in power. And that's the way it is. So that's our real problem. We have to get to the minds of the people out there, the minds of our people, an understanding of what the problem is, the nature of the problem, get rid of the foolish ideas which people talk about, and do the job. Okay, buddy, all you guys from Wall Street, you're bankrupt. You maybe have a little bit of value left in their systems, your gambling system, and we'll give you credit for that. But you're not going to take fake money and keep passing that around and inflating it without producing anything. And that's where we are. So the problem here is the problem of the public is the public doesn't understand this because there are very few competent economists in the United States. Actually competent economists. They are not really capable because they don't know what they're talking about. And we now got a generation, now if you look at the time that this whole process started, when this was canceled, when the Glass-Steagall system was canceled, most people today have lost track of what that used to be. They just don't understand it. And they believe in fantasies. And that's what's killing us. And if we don't, we have to do this as I've prescribed. There is no other option for the people of the United States in particular. None. They need Glass-Steagall, and without it, the people of the United States, will not make it. So this is a question of life and death. We install Glass-Steagall, it's life. You reject Glass-Steagall, there's death. It's that simple. And all the arguments in between don't mean a damn thing.